Welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
I'm Craig.
And with us today we have our special guest, Kristen Kennedy. Hi, Kristen.
Hello, Todd.
Hi. And Kristen just happens to be somebody important in Craig's life.
Yeah, my baby sister.
That's true. I'm here.
So are you the one that Craig subjected horror films to growing up? Were you also into that sort of thing?
I was into it by default. I wasn't so much necessarily into it as I was just there, and he made me watch it. And so many a days on the couch with a pillow to cover my eyes and things like that. But
Really?
He was definitely into it, and I was subjected to it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You were very forgiving.
She didn't have much choice.
I really didn't. There wasn't a lot of choice. I don't even know what was going on that we were so young and watching these horror films all the time, but it was happening regularly.
Did he have to watch, like, romantic comedies or something to compensate, or...
No. I was the silent partner. I just was along for the ride, and I did what he told me to do.
Oh my gosh. And so you wore Troll 2 out. Or Troll. Troll out,
yeah.
Basically.
Troll 2, I think we just watched the once.
Yeah, that's all it deserves.
It didn't need a rewatching.
Oh my gosh. So Craig cajoled you into coming and joining us here today.
He did. I've been listening ever since you started, and so I like the listening part. He said, do you want to come and be a guest speaker or person? I was like, I don't know if I'll say anything, but I'll come watch a movie.
Now, did you choose this film, or was this, did Craig...
Sort of, kinda. He said, well, what movie would you want to watch? I was like, I don't know. I haven't even really been watching horror movies lately. I married a guy who hates horror movies, and so really, I haven't even been watching. Sometimes I can get away with the suspense thriller type film, and since you all started doing this, and I've been listening, then I'll say, okay, Craig, send me that one. I'll watch it before I listen, so I've watched a few that way, but I haven't been watching too many lately.
Right, so, but I wanted you to pick, because, you know, our intense selection process, we decided to waive that this week, and I really wanted to get you here. And you said the types of movies that really get to you are not like monster movies and stuff like that, but things that could potentially really happen.
Yeah, so I did say this title. You know, when he first asked me, I was thinking, well, gosh, what were the ones we watched? We watched, you know, all the Friday the 13th, all the Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, all those types of films that were big when we were growing up. Pet Sematary, really anything Stephen King we did. And I thought, but you know, when I want to watch a horror film or a suspense film or something like that, I guess I want to be scared, or I want it to have some sort of impact on me. And these kind of psychological thrillers or things that feel like they could really happen, those are the ones that stick with me and really get under my skin. And so for me to feel like it was worth watching, I feel like I need to kind of have that reaction.
So you threw out the title. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't even know that you would have ever even heard of this movie.
Yeah.
How did you?
I saw a preview for it at some point and thought, well, that looks disturbing. You know, and I moved away from small town to a slightly bigger town, and, you know, there are home invasions, so I've actually avoided this film for about a decade. But then I thought, well, I haven't seen it. I don't know that much about it. I saw the preview. I haven't read up on it. I've heard certain things about it, you know, that it's disturbing and whatnot, but I really didn't know much about it. So I thought it might be fun to sit down and watch one that I hadn't seen before, didn't really know much about beyond the preview, and go from there.
Now, I'm in the same boat. I didn't know anything about it either. It had come across my Netflix queue a couple times, and I'm not sure if it was this one or the Austrian version, the original.
Maybe we should let them know that we're talking about.
Oh yeah. So this movie is Funny Games.
Funny Games, and this is the 2007 remake of 1996 or
97, I think.
97. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was exactly 10 years. It's an American remake. It was originally shot in Austria, and the original filmmaker, what I heard was that he really wanted this to be set in an American setting, and he wanted it to reach an American audience. But the budget constraints didn't allow for that. So he made it in Austria, and then I don't know how the opportunity arose, but 10 years later, the opportunity arose for him to remake it, and he did, and he remade it shot for shot.
Really?
I've not seen the original, but everything that I've read from people who have seen both say it is literally the same movie, just with different actors.
Oh my God.
And what I also read is a lot of people really prefer this one.
Really?
Well, and maybe that's just the American audience that I'm reading because, you know, we're lazy sometimes and don't want to read subtitles or whatnot. But I had seen this a long time ago, and I remember it really having an impact on me, but I only watched it the one time, and maybe there was a reason for that. So I was excited to come back to it, too. Had you not seen it before tonight?
No, never. No.
Oh, wow.
I knew nothing. I knew it was a home invasion film, and that was it.
Gotcha.
There are a lot of home invasion films.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really the kind of film I choose. I'm almost the opposite of you, Kristen. When I'm watching a horror movie, I almost want to see something supernatural. To me, that's a little more thrilling and exciting, and stuff that could really happen to me. Maybe it gets under my skin a little more. Yeah. And also, where do you draw the line? And is this really even a horror film?
Right.
And I don't know. And I was reading a little bit. I didn't want to spoil anything because I hadn't seen it, but I was reading some interviews with Naomi Watts, and she was sort of talking about how she kind of often does films that seem genreless, and how, she did Mulholland Drive, and that was sort of her first one that kind of made her on the radar, and that felt kind of genreless. It wasn't really horror. It wasn't really suspense.
Yeah.
What was it? I don't know. I've seen it, and I have no idea. I couldn't tell you what it was. But she said this one's kind of the same, but she's known for taking on roles that are really emotionally draining and require just a lot emotionally and psychologically. And I think this one fit the bill.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No kidding.
She didn't get an Academy Award for this one, did she?
No, I don't think so.
None of these movies are up for awards, but holy crap, what she had to go through.
Yeah. The premise, I guess, is that, it's really simple. Usually we spend a lot of time on plot. I feel like we're not going to have to do that because it's a pretty thin plot,
it's
really.
Like 3 sentences. You can describe it. Yeah.
Right. There's this family. They seem like
upper crust.
Yeah,
almost.
upper crust. And they're going to their summer home. They're taking their boat, and it's a young couple. George is the dad, and Anne is the mom. And
George played by Tim Roth.
Right. And Anne played by Naomi Watts. Right. And then they have one son who seemed to be, 7, maybe?
I'd say probably around 10. I have a son who's almost 8, and I thought,
okay.
This kid's older.
He's younger than my son, but not enough that it's not making me really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And a dog. And they're going to their summer house, and when they pull up in front of a neighbor's house, and their neighbors are standing outside, and with them are these 2 young men I thought they were caddies at first. They're dressed in these preppy white shorts and white sweaters and white gloves.
But you see them from a distance through the gate.
Right,
it's a very awkward scene. It's awkward staging. Everything about it is awkward.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey! That's not fair!
What?
Practicing's not fair. You're still on for 10 tomorrow, right? Still coming?
Yeah, sure.
We have to launch the boat. Can you give us a hand? In about 20 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll be there. I'll come over in 20 minutes.
Okay, great. See you then.
Bye! And when they drive away, Anne, says, that was weird. Why were they acting weird?
Yeah, she did. She said, that was weird, and I just wrote, indeed. Weird indeed. Everything about this film in the 30 seconds we've been watching has been weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they go on, and they get there, and they start unpacking and things. The dad... Well, they say, when they were back at the neighbors, they say, we need help unloading the boat. So the male neighbor, Fred, comes over with one of these young guys, and they help him get the boat in. And the dog doesn't seem to like the young guy.
Yeah, was that Paul?
It's Paul.
Paul.
We find out later that we don't really find out anything.
No.
We don't know what these guys' names are. But
We
the names that they go by most commonly, the main one, or the one that I kind of think of as the ringleader, is Paul. And then there's Peter.
Or
Tom, yeah,
Or
they call it, because when they said
Tubby.
Peter and Paul, I was like, is this a biblical reference?
Right.
I can't
Is Mary
figure
going to
out.
pop in here at some
Yeah,
point?
I didn't know what they were doing because they
Right.
kept saying different names. I couldn't keep it straight.
Right.
Well, and I felt like, too, sometimes they were intentionally flipping their names.
Yeah.
Am I wrong about this?
Oh, they definitely were.
Okay.
Especially
I didn't
Paul.
catch
It
that.
seemed like Paul was intentionally calling Peter different names.
Yeah.
It had to have been intentional because everything is so contrived. And that's the thing. These boys, we find out very soon, are playing games with these people. Hence the title, Funny Games.
Except they're not so funny.
No,
not
they're not
funny
funny
at
at
all.
all.
They're not. They don't even start out funny.
No.
And the interesting thing about this movie, compared to a lot of films like this, is that these boys, even from the beginning, it's not like there's a sudden point in the middle where you realize, oh, they're really nice and really polite. Deep down inside, they're evil. From the beginning, there's something off about these kids. They're overly polite.
Yeah.
And they seem to fit in with the surroundings because they're dressed in those golf shirts and they have the gloves on, but they don't take the gloves off. And I don't know about you, but that was a little weird.
Right.
And they're overly polite. And we'll basically, Naomi Watts' character, Anne, right, is in the kitchen. She's cooking dinner. And we're subjected to these really long domestic scenes.
Yeah.
One take, one shot, camera doesn't cut away of her talking on the phone and going to the door and washing lettuce and then going back and chopping things. And then the other kid comes in.
Peter.
Who we hadn't seen before this, just in the distance.
Just in the distance, right? And he shows up, and her son says, "There's somebody here," and she goes to the door, and like he's super polite, but like oddly, like I don't know. There's just something about them that seems off. I mean, we kind of knew what kind of movie we were getting into anyway.
Yeah.
but
Still.
But
yeah.
even the son said, when he came over and they're helping him get the boat in, about the friend, the neighbor that they knew, he said, why is Uncle Fred behaving so oddly or weirdly or something like that? They noticed he was off, because he's being led by these guys who have apparently been at their house for however many days, and who knows what they've done to them.
Well, and there's a little bit of foreshadowing. Did you notice there at the very beginning, as they're driving away, the little boy said, "Where's Jenny?" And I guess Jenny was, and then he kept saying, Jenny said she was going to be here. She said she was going to be here as soon as we got here. So I'm presuming that was Fred and Eve, the neighbor's daughter. And
I didn't quite catch that, but you're right.
A little bit of foreshadowing, we'll get there.
Well, he comes in asking for some eggs. He said, "Oh, Fred and
Eve."
And what's interesting here too is he starts calling them Fred and Eve, but then he corrects himself and says, "Oh, Mr. So and so and Mrs. So and so."
Yeah.
So again, that's a little off. Like he's faking how familiar he is with them. The whole scene is just filled with dread.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It's super awkward, super uncomfortable. I just was thinking, it just starts off awkward right away, but then, even when the kid says, "Mom, there's someone at the door," he looks terrified.
Yeah.
And then there's this really odd shot where it's like through a valance or something where it's kind of white and you can't see his face, and they're just sort of staring at each other, no one's saying anything, and then it's sort of like, "Hi," they have these very eerie, soft voices, and then they go on about the eggs,
Peter.
and it's just awkward the whole time. And I was thinking, I can feel right away this is awkward, and I don't know. She invites him in, and it goes on with the eggs, and things get weird, and I'm just thinking, I would have just gotten out of there.
Yeah.
Let's walk outside now. Just follow me outside.
I mean, it starts out kind of innocently enough.
So, how can I help you?
Tell your dad we're eating in 10 minutes.
Well, Eve's... I mean, Mrs. Thompson sent me. She's cooking and she ran out of eggs and asked if he could help her out.
Of course. How many does she need?
4.
4? What for?
Excuse me?
What for? What does she need the eggs for? I mean, what's she cooking?
I have no idea.
So, are they okay just like this, or do you need the carton?
Whatever you want.
And he takes them just in his hands, and he goes around the corner like he's going to leave, and you hear them drop. And then
She comes in to clean him up, and again we have, at the beginning of this whole deal. Of course you noticed we don't see the characters for a while. The opening of the film has this overhead shot of the car driving down the highway, and we hear dialogue in the car, and it goes, and then it's a close-up shot inside of the car of just the stereo, and then putting CDs in. I don't know about you, but I was getting really antsy, like, I want to see these people.
Yeah.
Like, show me these people. And you finally do see the people, and all that we talked about goes on, but then even when they come home, there's a whole long sequence before the kid comes over where they're letting the dog out and they're walking the dog and he's taking his shoes off and they're setting things out around the house. And you're hearing the voices, but you're not seeing them. And again, I don't know about you, but it's just like, oh, show me the people already. Show me their faces.
It's really stylized, and it's that way throughout. It's not your typical cinematography where you're following characters. A lot of this movie, the action happens out of frame, and and we are often looking at one frame for a really long time, and I think that does a lot to build suspense. It makes it feel uncomfortable because you just want the camera to turn just a little bit. You want to see the people, you want to see what's going on. Sometimes you don't want to see what's going on.
And you never quite know fully what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's unsettling. You can hear some things. Sometimes it was almost like, I can't tell exactly who's talking, or get that dog to stop barking.
Yeah.
It was just sort of, it's nerve-wracking right from the beginning.
Well, and when he drops the eggs on the floor, there's this, again, extremely uncomfortable scene that we can all kind of relate to, where she bends down to scoop up the eggs, but she only has a couple towels, and she's really bad with it, and she can't quite do it. And it's none of the panache of a quick sweep away that normal movies have.
Right.
It's a very real scene, but again, it's lingering so long on there, and you really want to see what does her face look like, and what's this other guy doing while he's standing there? Is he staring at her? Is he looking around? What's going on? It's almost like we all know that really socially awkward person who just stares just a little too long at you or around, doesn't say anything. It's almost like the camera is making us that guy.
Yeah,
for sure. And they were socially awkward. I think that's what you would just think. Like, they're very socially awkward. Maybe they only have really rich friends and they don't, you know, it's just like, why is he standing there watching her? Why isn't he bending down and helping her clean up the eggs? And
or why doesn't he leave?
Why doesn't he? I got it. See you later.
He's got nothing to say, except this expectation that she's just going to get him more eggs.
Right.
Yeah.
And an insistent expectation.
Right, and he's kind of pushy about it, but pushy in like that passive-aggressive, polite way, like, well, I'm just asking you for eggs. I don't really understand what the big deal is. And so she, she's irritated. And not only that, but at some point, he knocks her cell phone in the sink. And it's
in
like,
the water.
Yeah, in the water. It's like, oops, sorry. And she's like, okay, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's the point where you start to notice she's irritated and uncomfortable. And
you would be.
Right. And he's just sort of like, can I get those eggs now?
Yeah.
You said you had a dozen, right?
Right. So she sends him, not very happily, but she sends him away with 4 more eggs in a carton. And he goes out, and you hear the dog barking, and then you hear the door open back up again, I think, and she goes around the corner, and both boys are there now. Is that right?
Yeah, the other boy comes in. Oh, because the dog was barking or whatever. And so he's just standing there. You don't hear him come in. You just see that he's inside now, I think.
Yeah, and they weren't invited in. It's just weird and creepy. And they say, well, the dog chased us up here. The dog scared Peter, and he dropped the eggs. And
now we need more eggs.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want you guys to go. At this point, she's starting to feel like it's uncomfortable. I'm wondering, where's your husband and your kid? If there are these creepy boys around, although I guess they don't know they're creepy yet.
Right.
Now, is this the point where No, not yet.
No, well, it was right around here. Okay, so I think that the husband comes up and she's trying to get them out. Like, at this point, she is not worried about being polite anymore, and she is physically trying to remove them. And that's when the husband comes in.
Will you throw them out?
What's going on? Good that you're here, Mr. Farber. That's your name, isn't it, Farber? Yeah, Mr. Thompson told us.
What's going on here? I want them to
Your
leave.
wife is under the wrong impression. I'm happy that you're here because I'm certain that you can help us figure out this misunderstanding.
George, please.
Dad, I can't.
Just go, please.
Hey, man.
It's ridiculous. I can't believe this. Honey,
No,
do you
he's
mind?
fine. He's fine.
May I please explain what happened?
Please do.
Mrs. Thompson sent me over to ask for some eggs. And then...
Your wife gave Peter the eggs, but unfortunately they broke.
And then she gave me another 4 eggs, but the dog jumped on me, and now... You had a dozen. You're going shopping on Monday anyway. We just want the eggs, that's all.
Man, can you tell me what's going on here? Honey, can you just tell me what's going on?
Just give them to him.
Can I have them now?
Hold on a moment.
Oh, sorry.
And if it's just about some eggs, why are you so angry?
Look, I'm not going to justify myself in front... I asked you to throw them out. Maybe I have my reasons. Do what you want. I've had enough.
Anne.
And I was thinking, if I told my husband to get him out of here and he was like, now hang on a second, there'd be a problem. Obviously, I'm uncomfortable with these boys, but I can understand he's trying to be polite. They were with his friends. I'm sure he's thinking, I don't want to, cause a problem with our neighbors or our friends, but it's getting more awkward by the second.
Yeah, and at some point in there, we kind of skipped over it. The main guy, Paul, admires the dad's golf clubs and asks if he can go out and swing it, and she's like, I guess, and he goes out and the dog is barking and everybody's hearing the dog bark, and then all of a sudden the dog stops barking. We, as the viewer, have a pretty good idea of what's happened.
This poor dog. As soon as he came on, I actually wrote down, that dog's gonna die. I felt like, and that was something in the beginning, you were talking about those long shots where it's just like, here's where all the shoes sit, and here are the golf clubs. I kind of felt like they were giving us the layout. They're showing, this is where some bad stuff's gonna happen, and this is where some bad stuff's gonna happen with the golf clubs, and here's this dog, he's not gonna be around long. It kind of felt like it's setting it up so that we can get a lay of the land and we can see how everything's going to go wrong in this film. And just an interesting tidbit, since we know that they did this remake shot by shot, I actually saw too that they used the blueprints from the original, and so they made sure that even though the house was Americanized or a little different, the proportions were all still exactly the same, and the floor plan was still the same.
That makes sense, because actually the kitchen seemed a little strange to be right off of the... what do I know about Austrian kitchens or whatever, but it did seem a little European-ish to me, the way the layout might be.
Eventually, when she tries to get them out, the husband kind of just says, well, my wife's really not feeling well, but I don't have all the facts, so I really can't mediate. It'd probably just be better if you leave. And they want the eggs. Yeah,
and so they just go up to him kind of with their hands outstretched, like, well, then give me the eggs. And we'll go.
And he won't. And eventually, Paul... his polite demeanor starts to break, and he starts to be a little bit more aggressive, and...
He gets in his face, basically.
Yeah, he gets in the dad's face, and George, the dad, says, you need to watch your tone with me, young man, or something like that, and what does he respond?
Something about... you need to watch yourself with me or I'll break you, or old man, or something.
Yeah, I'll break your eggs, old man.
Yeah.
Right. So George slaps him across the face.
Yeah.
And
that wasn't going to end well.
Right. Peter, the other one, grabs one of the clubs from the golf bag and just hits the dad right in the leg. But again, we don't see it, right?
I didn't see it.
It's off screen. You hear it, and you hear the dad go down.
And the poor son is right there.
Right there.
This. And I think Anne wasn't.
No, she wasn't there.
But she comes back.
Right. And that is just, I think...
that was the point.
That's when Paul starts talking to them and says something like, we're going to play a game. And then we are sitting here, and it's been storming in our town tonight, and right at that moment when it's a close-up right on his face, he's looking almost directly into camera, and it says, we're going to play a game, and boom, the power goes out. And it testifies to the tense nature of this movie, because I think all three of us jumped.
Oh, we totally did.
Oh, yeah. I was checking my heart rate on my Fitbit. I think I just had a mini heart attack. Was that a part of the movie? No.
Yeah, it was amazing how the tension could build in this scene that takes place in broad daylight, right there at the entrance to the house where anybody could walk out a door with even two guys who are outnumbered. I mean, one of them's a kid, but still... I think the polite society, we try to be somewhat trusting of each other. We try to... And I think also this upper crust family figures just in the back of their head. I think it's their default mode that anybody who is here in our gated community is somehow cool and clear and safe. And so everything about the movie, except for that weirdness and oddness that gets inserted, says there are 15 ways out of this, and it should generally go okay.
Right. They've had friends stop by, and I think, you mentioned the gated community, and at one point Anne says, how'd you get in here, by the way? And he says, oh, there's a hole in the fence. That might be
Shady.
my first step. So Fred told you to crawl through the hole in the fence rather than calling us to ask for eggs.
Right.
So I think, there were some odd things going on beforehand, but,
That she just dismissed, right?
She did.
And from that point on, these boys just play these sick, psychotic games with these people. I mean, I was trying, the first one's a guessing game, and Paul pulls the golf ball out of his pocket and drops it and says, what is that? And none of the family says anything, and he says, come on, what is it? And the dad says, a golf ball. And he says, why was it in my pocket? And you see in Naomi Watts' face the realization of what's happened. None of them say anything, and eventually Peter says, because you never hit it. And Naomi Watts says, where is he? She knows that he's used the golf club to kill their dog. And then, so Paul takes her outside and plays warmer, colder with her to show her where the dead dog is. And colder, colder, cold.
And really, I think that's the first time, too, that we get the full-on look into the camera, and we're seeing, okay, this is not going to be a typical movie. They're breaking the fourth wall kind of a thing. And I guess it's kind of subtle at that point, because he could be looking back. We don't know if the rest of the family's there, but it's the first time it's directly into camera and kind of a smirk.
Right? Like he's direct,
fun?
right? Like he's winking at us, the viewer.
Yeah, he's kind of trying to pull us to his side, and I think that's part of the point of this film is, isn't this what you guys want?
Right.
Isn't this what you came here to see? Right. So yeah, that was also makes one fairly uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's the thing. This kind of comes up several times, but the guy who directed it also wrote it, and he has said outright in interviews that this is his commentary on the way that we consume violence in art and film and whatnot. And I think it's really a criticism of, you sick bastards, why do you want to see people getting brutalized and murdered, for entertainment? Why is that entertainment? And I think that that's part of the reason that he made the decision not to show a lot of the brutality and violence on screen. Instead, you just kind of see the aftermath of what happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of getting around that, because that criticism of a person who's trying to make that point is always, but aren't you feeding into it? You're making this movie, you're including all this violence. I think back to Martyrs.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a big portion of a point that Martyrs is trying to make. Yet Martyrs, you have to sit through and watch these people getting horribly tortured. Whereas in this case, you never have to see it. You just get to hear it and imagine it.
Which doesn't make it any less uncomfortable.
No, not at all.
And I think, too, everyone that I had talked about this movie, too, had said it's so violent, it's so disturbing. But then I wondered, do they even remember? You don't actually see it. You see some things after the fact, but really, you only see one thing, and that's later, and then it's kind of erased, sort of. So, you don't actually see it. You see the aftermath, sort of, not really a whole lot, but you can hear things, and I think it's worse. I mean, I think what you can imagine is worse than what it would actually be.
Right. I think so, too. And I think that it was maybe more effective because we've seen that before. We've seen these home invasion movies before. We've seen the people get beat up. This is unexpected. It takes us out of our comfort zone. And I think it definitely has an interesting effect.
And didn't you admittedly have that feeling too? Like, I want to see it? Like,
no.
Go back and show me.
I didn't.
I mean, not like show me that, but like, I want to see what's happening.
Or
like,
I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to admit, there's this part of me that I don't have this bloodlust or anything.
Right.
But I did kind of want to, just like in the beginning, where I kind of wanted to see their faces, kind of wanted to see their reactions. Well, I kind of wanted to know for sure what was going on.
Right, and I think that is probably part of his point, is that why do we have that morbid curiosity? And I totally know what you mean. It's like, a car accident, you can't look away, you look. And this kind of doesn't allow you to do that, but that makes it doubly uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and they even make some comments here that are clearly directed more toward the audience than to us, or at least explicitly stating the theme, right? Mm-hmm. Part of their playing with them is also this excessive politeness, and they're almost pretending like they're good guys and like they're being nice to them, and not even in that way where if you're good and you cooperate, bad things won't happen to you. Almost in a way that the whole time they're dangling this carrot in front of them of doubt that maybe we're going to get out of this okay, until they turn to them and say, we're going to make a bet, right?
Yeah. And I kept trying to figure out, and I think that's the point, I kept writing, what are the rules? What are the rules? Because when I would think I would kind of figure it out, they'd break the rules. Or, they, even at one point, one of the guys, and I think it was Paul, said something about they're doing something to preserve moral dignity. And here they are all in their white, and they never curse, and they speak very politely. And they are very polite the whole time, even when they're brutal. They're very polite, and if the Anne or George or whoever doesn't act polite, that's when they're sort of brutalized. And so it seems like they're trying to have a sort of commentary on that.
Well, and I think he even says, because I wrote this down, it's easier when things are polite.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
I wrote that down too. I was like, it just gives you the willies.
Yeah.
I mean, and from this point, really, they're just torturing these people. I mean, the dad's leg is broken. They are,
Killed the dog.
They killed the dog. At one point, the little boy gets away and runs to a neighbor's house, but they've already killed the neighbors too. Paul finds him and brings him back. I mean, there's so many times, the kid gets away and you're like, please, kid, just run. Just keep running and never stop.
I mean, it even made me write down, I need to tell my kid, just run.
Yeah.
Run as far as you can if anything ever happens. And, I work in an elementary school, and we have to practice intruder drills. And we tell the kids, run until you can't see anything. Run. We will find you wherever you end up. It's better to find you far away in a bush somewhere than to, have you here with the bad people. And so it just made me think, these are things that you have to somehow, as a parent, not really scare your child into, talking about those kinds of situations that hopefully you'll never encounter, but man, I want my kid to know, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
Run!
Yeah.
You could see this kid struggling with, my mom and dad are in there. Should I climb the fence? Should I stay close? What should I do?
So you're saying it would be instructive to show this film to your children?
No.
Well, it is interesting, and you are sitting there going, climb the fence, climb. No, don't come back down. Don't go back in. No, don't go in the corner. No, don't do everything. But you kind of know that he's not going to make it anyway, simply because these guys seem so unconcerned that he's taken off.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess I expected him to get caught, even though I really didn't want him to. This cute little kid, and he was so scared, and that little actor did such a good job.
And that's heartbreaking.
I know, and that, what Naomi Watts, I think, talked about how difficult it was for her. Who is the lead actor, the dad?
Oh, Tim Roth.
Yeah,
Tim Roth.
I was reading about, he said that it was so horrible making this film that he will not watch it.
And has not watched it.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Naomi Watts really said, I've done a lot of difficult films that were really emotionally demanding, and I just find ways to take myself out of it, and the director was really great. We would find moments where we needed to escape. Sometimes we just had to get off set for a while. Sometimes we would just make a really inappropriate joke, or, we would find ways to deal with it. And she said, I can go home and not take it home with me, but it doesn't seem like Tim Roth could do that. I mean, he has not watched it. He said
well,
it was too hard.
and he has said that part of the reason was because the actor who played his son reminded him very much of his own son.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I can see how that would be terrible. They bring the son back, and of course, this is after you said that thing about preserving moral standards or something like that. That was when they put a pillowcase over the kid's head and they made the mom take her clothes off.
Don't want to hurt the kitty cat, right?
Leave him alone.
Exactly. Daddy would like to play too. What are we waiting for? Tell your wife not to be shy. It's silly. I'm sure she doesn't have jelly rolls.
Please leave him alone.
You just have to tell her to take off her clothes.
Please.
Take off your clothes, honey.
God, that was the most horrible for me to watch, seeing that poor kid struggling to breathe under this thing. And I remember thinking, because the husband is there sort of looking at her and she's looking to him and he's saying, take off your clothes. They're sort of making the husband tell her. Yeah. And I was thinking, nobody'd have to tell me. As a mom, I'd be stripping my clothes off, whatever I could do. And I had to, I kept thinking over and over. Of course, you never know what you would do in that situation. Right. But I kept thinking, someone messes with my kids, I'm going to do everything I can to get my kid out of that situation. And that was something, too, that Naomi Watts had said. She said, I wanted to believe that I could have got my family out of that situation. But you don't know. You just have no idea what's going to go on in that kind of thing. And
well, they were so paralyzed throughout the whole thing. And I think that comes forward toward the end when the husband is talking with his wife, when the killers have ostensibly left. Unfortunately, the kid has been killed.
Yeah, they kill the kid first, and it's...
Which is so weird.
It is. I mean, it defies convention. You always think the kid is going to make it. But I think that's what they were going for. I think he was trying to defy convention. And Paul, the main guy, even comments on it. He said, "What are you doing? You don't kill the kid first. Don't you know anything about timing or something like that?" Yeah. And it's like he's playing this thing out. And he says stuff like that a couple of different times. After they kill the kid, they leave. They say, "Oh, time for us to go. I gotta go.
We'll put the
grab
clubs
some
away.
food.
Right. See you later."
Door shuts and they can hear the car drive off.
And that is where you just see, again, it's one of those still frames of just the room, and you see blood on the TV and on the wall. You see the husband's legs on the floor coming out of one side of the couch. Everything's kind of obscured by the couch. Naomi Watts is kneeling. She's bound. Hands and feet are bound together.
In her underwear.
You couldn't
get more vulnerable than she is in that moment.
And you see the kid's legs over by the TV, and that's where the spray of blood is. Now, at first, I remember seeing this the first time. It appeared that they shot the kid, and I couldn't believe it. But then I also thought that maybe they had killed them both.
I thought so too. It plays some games with you by showing you the father's legs, but you don't hear him.
And he doesn't move.
And there was only one, we only heard one shot fired.
There was only one shot, but then you heard kind of what it sounded like a kind of scuffle
or struggle.
Right. Which I can only imagine is the parents doing whatever they can. I mean, there's nothing that they could do. I mean, the dad has this terrible broken leg. She's completely bound. Her hands are together, her feet are together, and
that is a long scene.
And it's so painful.
And the TV has been on and been very loud the whole time too. So there's all this extra noise, and it's just it's hard to watch on many levels. But then too, you feel so aggravated by the noise and everything, and you almost feel like, one of the first things Naomi Watts does is she sort of tries to maneuver herself over to the TV to just turn the darn TV off, so there's not that extra noise.
And then there's that horrible silence.
When the camera is away is when the physical pain happens, but the emotional pain is what the camera lingers on, and it forces you to be a voyeur and to stare and live through this pain, watch these people go through this pain. That was a terrible scene. That scene was at least 5 minutes long.
Oh, it was long.
Of her struggling and getting out, and it's not just of her physically struggling, but it's of her mentally getting the will to get up and to do these things and to move around, and then getting her husband up. And, another scene shortly before the kid was killed, when they track him down, is this look of terror in his face when he's cornered with the gun, and the tears are streaming down his face, and that lingers for so long on that. It's super uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like, you like to go pay movie to see people get killed. Now we're going to make you consider the actual ramifications of something violent like this happening.
Try to feel what they're feeling.
And that is why that scene, I don't have kids, but I can only imagine. What could you... I think you turned to me and said, at that point...
I said... Well, for one thing, I noticed right away, as she's struggling to get to the TV, as she's struggling to get to her feet, because her feet are taped together, really close together, and, her arms are behind her back. She never once looked at the kid.
No.
And I thought, there's no way you could. If you were going to get out of that and stay conscious, you couldn't look. And I just really, I think I was holding my breath that whole time as she was trying to stand up, and she'd fall down, and you can tell she's trying to fall in a way that she's not going to see the kid, or I don't even know if she knows if her husband's alive at that point.
Right. And then he gets himself set up, and then I feel like he kind of starts sobbing. And it's, it's that kind of sob where you don't even have the breath for it. And she runs back in. We assumed she was going to the kitchen to get a knife to take her tape off, which she had, and she runs back in, and she just gets down on the floor with him and embraces him, and they're just holding there in that embrace for a good 30 seconds or longer, and it's just agonizing. I mean, you just can't even imagine what they must be feeling or thinking in that moment.
Yeah, and this whole sequence really conjures up these conflicting feelings, right? You have the feelings of guilt, you have the feelings of sadness, you have the feelings of putting yourself in their shoes and vicariously living this grief through them. But then there's also this nagging part of you that's like, you guys need to get out of that house.
Get out of there. I remember I turned to Craig and I said, as a parent though, we assume that's their only child. That's the only kid that was with them. And in a way, you're sort of like, what does it matter now? We just watched our kid get killed in front of us. Oh, well, whatever happens to us, that's kind of, when you're a parent, it feels like very much your life is living for your kid a lot of the time. And so it would be very hard to just think, okay, well, we need to run now. But at the same time, watching it, I was thinking, get up! Get a move on! I know your leg hurts, but you would think you could walk on it for a little while.
And that's, that's what they do. They start to get up and start to get ready to leave. And I felt like this part, the whole time I'm thinking, get out, get out, get out. But at the same time, I'm thinking, if I were in this situation, I might be doing the same things that they were doing.
Well, and he told her, you gotta go. His leg, he's realizing he's too hurt. He doesn't think he can make it. He's gonna hold him back. There's the whole bit about the cell phone. They try to get the cell phone to work that's been dropped in the water.
Well, and it comes on, and so they keep trying to mess with it. And I can imagine that I would do that. Like if I got that cell phone to work and I thought there was some hope that it might actually work, I might have lingered a little bit longer than I should have.
But he says to her, you've got to go. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be the one to go. I know they supposedly left, but they're probably out there.
Right.
They came before. I don't want to run out there and be by myself.
And you can I felt like I could see that in her face. The reluctance. Like she didn't want to go by herself, but there was no other choice.
Yeah.
She ends up leaving after the struggle with the cell phone, and he's propped up on a chair. He manages to drag himself, meanwhile, in, I think, put a blanket over the kid. And then she goes she goes to the next door neighbor and she yells through the gate and they're not there. And she's struggling down the road.
It's the middle of the night at this point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a car starts to come by. And again, you've been in this situation 100 times before when you're looking for a car and you're not sure it's the right one because every car looks the same when just the headlights are barreling straight towards you. But she hides behind a tree because it could be them coming back. And as soon as it passes by and it's not, she runs out, and of course she can't flag them down. Then another car comes, and just when we're about to see whether it's them or not, it cuts to the guy inside.
And you can see, God, I just think she did such a good job, and I'm sure the direction and the cinematography had something to do with it too, but you can see that conflict in her face. Do I take the chance?
Right.
The last one was safe. If I had taken that one, I could, be out of here. Do I take the chance? And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know either. I don't know what you should do.
I don't know either, but I'm a baby, and so I think I would have still hidden and then just kept running for houses or something. But it just goes to show you, we have these gates, we have all these security systems to keep people out. Mm-hmm. But then, that's kind of her biggest problem is she can't get in anywhere to get help. There's so much security, and she can't get somewhere.
She should have taken those wire clippers with her and cut the neighbor's fence.
Yeah.
Right.
What was she thinking?
Well, it was them in the car, and they get her and they bring her back. And I mean, this is endgame. I mean, the main guy Paul basically says, they do the counting off thing again to see who's going to go first, and Peter, who is doing the counting, messes it up several times and has to start over several times. So again, it's just this long, tense moment. But eventually, it comes down to it's going to be the husband, George. They tell Anne, now we get to play a game again. It's called
The Loving Wife, otherwise known as whether by knife or whether by gun, losing your life can sometimes be fun. Come on, don't fall asleep. You have to play the game, otherwise I have to gag you again, and you don't like that, do you?
And the game is, you get to choose how he dies. Do we shoot him? Or do we stab him to death? And as they have been doing this whole time, they force these people to participate. And there's part of me that almost just wanted her to just be defiant and just refuse. But again, when she refuses, off camera, we don't see it, but we hear it, one of them stabs the husband, and he's moaning and clearly in agony.
And she did refuse once, I think, in some way, and they ended up punching her in the stomach, and it was kind of the first time they had been violent to her. And so I think it was kind of... and they kind of threw the kid on them, and so it was showing, all right, they're not going to just beat up the dad, or, you know, it's anything goes kind of a deal. And we didn't mention this, but at some point, and I think it was before the son even died, or no, it was right after they shot the son, you know, there's kind of this scuffle, and, you know, Paul is saying, oh, what'd you do that for? What'd you do? The boss is going to be so mad.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, who is the boss?
I know. Yeah, they dropped the eggs on the floor or something again. He said, oh, the boss is going to be mad because we're supposed to... He stressed that we need to keep the carpet clean.
He was talking about... I think he was talking about Peter. Paul. That was Peter that said it. I think he was talking about Paul.
Really?
Because Paul had said when he walked out, he said, remember, because what's his name? The other one was getting ready to kill somebody, and he said, he said, if you get bored with them, when he ran off to chase the kid, when Paul ran off to chase the kid, he said, if you get bored with them, just dump a bucket of water over his head, but careful not to mess up the rug. And then later, Peter drops the eggs, and he says, he specifically said don't mess up the rug.
But then I thought it was... kind of the ringleader guy who said the boss is going to be so
maybe
mad.
You're right. Maybe I missed
it. I feel like it was.
I couldn't figure out then, well, who is the boss?
Yeah.
And I don't think...
Tony Danza.
Yeah.
As soon as I said that, I was thinking, who's the boss? If only Tony Danza were part of this film, it would have been very different. But I couldn't figure it out, and maybe we're not supposed to, maybe it doesn't matter. And
well, because they've been lying through the whole time. I mean, we don't know if these are their real names, but Paul tells, all these silly backstories that are totally conflicting, and he even says, I'm lying. All of that was a lie. So we can't believe anything they say.
That they're drug addicts, and then, or that, the one guy sleeping with his mom, and he's actually white trash, and there are all these different backstories he gives. And sometimes they're funny. It's kind of a nice relief for a second. An uncomfortable laugh, I guess.
Right.
But I almost skipped over it because we were talking about they were forcing her to make the decision, and he's playing with her, trying to get her to make this decision. And for the first time, we see some violence on screen, and it happens so quickly. While he's playing with her, talking to her quietly, Naomi Watts, Anne, really super fast, jumps down to the coffee table where the shotgun is laying, and pulls it up and shoots Peter. Right through the chest. We see this. This is the first overt violence we've really seen. He flies up against the wall, and he's clearly dead. And I'm thinking, no matter what happens, thank God.
At least one of them's dead.
Right. At least she got one of them.
Yeah.
And then this, I think, is the most controversial part of the movie, and a part that people complain about.
Really?
Yeah.
That's when Paul is running around and he finds the remote control.
Yeah, where's the remote?
Mm-hmm.
Picks it up, hits the back on it, and it literally rewinds the film in front of us to the point before that happens so that they can replay it, and he grabs the gun just in time before she does it.
Right.
And he says to her, too, you're not allowed to break the rules right after that.
He's broken the rules, yeah. And I actually really thought that was ingenious. As far as trying to get your point across, here was the violence you really wanted to see.
Right.
And that is denied to you.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is frustrating because you want her to get away. And again, it's kind of defying formula because usually there's one person, no matter how much they go through, even if they don't necessarily overcome their pursuer, they get away, usually.
Even if they've lost everything,
right.
You're still holding out hope that one person's going to make it. And they're going to have a really screwed up life, but they're going to make it.
But instead, he forces her... Well, I don't... At that point, I think that he just shoots the husband.
Yes.
But before that, when he was toying with her, again, we got another one of those shots where he looks directly into camera and says, you guys want a good ending, right? With plausible plot points, right? Mm-hmm. And then he goes back to her. Again, it's like, this is what you want, right? This is what you want. And it's creepy.
And he too, right before when she grabs the gun, it's like what finally sets her off is they keep messing with her. They say any prayer, say it perfectly, and you get to decide what happens. And she's like, I don't know any prayers, And so they give her this really short, easy one, and so she says it, and then they say, okay, that was just practice. Now, and, and it's like, God, she did what you said. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Nothing's going to matter, and I think she realizes that, and that's when she grabs the gun, and of course that doesn't matter for us.
Right.
Yeah.
They shoot him, and then this is pretty much the end of the movie. It's morning by this time, and we see the three of them, the two boys and Anne, in rain slickers going down to the boat where the boat is docked. And they get in the boat. Again, there was a red herring kind of planted early on. The dad had needed a knife for working on the boat, and it had gotten left there, and she gets sat down right where it was. And she does pick it up and start to try to cut the knife, but they see her right away and just take it away. Like they give you, there may still be a shred of hope. No.
And they even commend her for her efforts. Oh, that's Olympic spirit or something. They're, look at her, sweet little thing, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, and then he says, come over here, sit next to me, it's safer up here. And so she's sitting between the two of them, and they're just having this random conversation.
About reality.
Yeah, it's not terribly random.
Right.
It definitely fits in with the theme. And Paul just looks at her and says, see you later, goodbye, and unceremoniously knocks her over the edge.
Yep.
There's no splash, there's no shot on her, body floating down slowly into the ocean or anything. She's just gone.
Yep,
She's gone. And then, I knew what was going to happen because early on in the film, a friend had stopped by and, very creepily, this young man said, hey, which house is yours? Like, just very odd. And she sort of describes her house. And so, that's their next stop. Yeah. And sure enough, that's their next stop. They just keep on sailing right to their house.
They're back with the egg routine.
And they need some, Anne needs some eggs.
He gets into their house, the main one, Paul, and the woman goes to get eggs. And again, he kind of looks around the house. Then he looks right at us in the camera and
freeze frame,
loud music, cue credits.
Yeah, and this loud music too. They use that a lot, and I thought, it's kind of clever. I wonder, does he just carry the CD around? Because the music just sounds like people screaming.
Yeah.
And they play it when they're murdering people, so it's disturbing on many levels.
Well, I think that conversation that they have is meant to be pointed, and I think it may even be a little bit heavy-handed, the conversation that the two boys have in the boat.
Yes.
I don't even know what they're talking about. I don't know if they're talking about movies, books, comic books, but the simpler of the two, Peter, is talking about something that he saw or read where a guy got trapped in an alternate reality and was trying to communicate with his family in the real reality, but then he realized that his alternate reality was fiction. And Paul says,
okay, so where's your hero now? Is he in reality or is he in fiction?
His family's in reality and he's in fiction.
But isn't fiction real?
Why?
Well, you can see it in the movie, right?
Of course.
Well, and it's just as real as reality. Because you can see it too. Right?
So isn't that just as real as real reality?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what he's getting at too. We crave, why? Why do we want to watch these horrible, horrible things that do happen in reality? And we pay a bunch of money to go to a movie theater and watch it play out
while we
on
eat
a big
popcorn
screen.
and candy.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to the question. I think it's an interesting question, especially for somebody like me and Todd who watch these things all the time.
Or maybe get judged for it occasionally.
Yeah, right.
Kristen.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I don't judge, and I like supernatural movies too. For me, this one, it got under my skin, but I'm not gonna. Well, I say this now. I'm not home by myself. I may lose sleep over it those nights, but it helped me that they did break that wall, that they looked into the camera, because then I could say, this is goofy. Thank you for breaking that, because now I don't feel like it's so real. And I just could breathe a little better once they started doing that, and I didn't feel so tense. So for me, that helped. And maybe that's, maybe the director wanted to do that. I don't know.
Well, it had the opposite effect on me. It felt like I'm part and parcel to this, that breaking that fourth wall means there is no separation between the reality of us and the TV, and therefore, I don't know. I mean, obviously I didn't literally think that, but it did kind of give me that sense, and it did caused me to question, why am I watching this?
Yeah.
Right.
We could have turned it off at any point.
Right.
We wouldn't have for the podcast,
Right.
but, you know, it's very true. This is something that bothered me a lot about Martyrs. That is a movie that I have very conflicted feelings about. And
You've seen it,
I've seen it, yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about that sometime later. But I felt like it was, in some ways, making a similar statement or attempting to.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this film was a little more skillful at it.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that movie once, and it was really brutal. I mean, it's just really, really... I mean, it's torture, and it's just... You see everything, and it's the worst kind of torture you can imagine, like flaying, and I mean, it's just awful. I think you're right. I think it was commentary on graphic violence in art as well, but I don't know. I felt like the message of that one got muddied a little bit.
Oh, yeah, well, especially by the end.
Yeah.
The ending is a little strange.
This one, I don't know that I necessarily agree with his message, but I think that it's something interesting to consider. I think that he's also maybe making the suggestion that because we... glorify is not the right word, but because we celebrate this in art, that may lead to people wanting to celebrate it in real life and maybe acting these things out when otherwise they wouldn't. And that's been a debate forever. You know, do violent video games, you know, cause teens to be violent? And I don't know what the answer is, but I wonder if he was maybe kind of digging at that question too.
Well, thankfully he made this so uncomfortable that it would be harder to... You can't really say he was glorifying the violence in this film in any way. By not showing it, of course. He denied us everything that you normally see in these movies. He even denied us the nudity, you know, that of Naomi Watts. But we got to linger on her face as she's experiencing the humiliation of that scene, which is 10 times worse. Which... Yeah. I mean, if every movie were like that, and every movie truly showed you the real power of violence, it would no longer be entertainment.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's hard to imagine where you could draw a line, how you could possibly have bad things happen in art without encountering that kind of a question.
I don't know. It's pretty heady for. it's definitely a bigger philosophical question than we had last week with Hausu. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, just to make it even darker, the original, I was reading that there's sort of a curse on this film, and people weren't sure if they should remake it because 3 of the 4 original actors from the original film are dead now.
You're kidding?
No.
Yeah, 3 of the 4. And, you know, one was in his 50s, I think, one like 36, 37. I know that the husband and wife were actually a couple in real life. I can't remember now. I know 2 men. I don't remember if it was the woman, but 3 of the 4 are now dead.
That's wild.
in a decade.
Crazy.
So there was just all around bad vibes sort of surrounding this film. But, you know, Naomi Watts kind of spoke to the violence piece, and she said it was very artfully done, and I think that, you know, people were questioning how violent it was, and I think she was trying not to give too much away by saying, you know, you may be surprised at what.
Well, I agree that it was artfully done. I think it was a well-made film. It was uncomfortable to watch, but I think it was really well made.
You alluded to some controversy earlier. Did we cover all that, or
gosh, I don't remember
people
what I was
mad about that rewind scene?
I think people were mad about the rewind scene, about the looking to the camera, about, you know, they're all about these rules and yet they keep breaking rules. That's kind of what I kept hearing from people.
I hate it when people say things like this because it's so pretentious, but honestly, the people who are complaining about that, I don't think they got the purpose of the movie.
I think you're absolutely right.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound pretentious. I get really irritated when people say stuff like that, but I really think that you kind of missed the point if those were the complaints that you had coming away from it.
Or perhaps didn't even see the film, you know?
Yeah,
they could have just heard about how brutal it is and stuff like... Because I certainly had heard it is so brutal, and I watched it and I thought, well, we really didn't see much of anything. I don't know how it did. Do you guys know?
It didn't do well. It only got a very limited theatrical release. It lost money. I don't think it made back half. It was on like a $15 million budget, and I don't think that it made that back.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think it did. It was really limited.
I could see people walking out of this film, you know, at the theater. I think it's so uncomfortable, and anytime you have, especially, I could see a lot of people leaving when that kid is dead. You know, we don't see him get killed, but it's just kind of like, all right, I didn't sign up for this. You know, we don't expect to see that. And but in a way, you know, psychos are just psychos, you know, and people try to figure out what they're thinking, but you know, there isn't.
There is no rhyme and reason behind it, right?
These games aren't as funny as you thought they were going to be.
Right.
They're not funny.
Well, thank you again for joining us for another episode. Thank you, Kristen,
Thank
for joining us.
I'm glad you came.
So great to have you.
Did you have
for
fun?
having me. Sure, yeah. I don't know that I had any insightful input, but
Yeah, you did. It was a lot of
fun.
fun. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun. A very serious subject matter, but fun to chat about.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Please check us out on iTunes. We're also on Stitcher. If you like this podcast, please share it with a friend. Check out our Facebook page. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say and your thoughts about this movie as well. Did you agree with the controversy? Did you not? Did you get it, as Craig said, or are you going to admit that you didn't? Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Craig.
And I'm Kristen.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.